Boker Tov on this fine Sunday morning. So we're starting, a new secular year, but perhaps more importantly, we're starting a new Chumash, a new book in the Torah. We finished this past Shabbat. We finished the Genesis. We finished the last portion, Vayechi. We all in the synagogue together announce Chazak, Chazak, v'nit chazek, be strong, and we will be strengthened. And we did so by reading the Torah. So everything that comes our way, especially challenges that we have as a people, as a nation, as a Jewish people, we always turn to the Torah for insight, for strength, for guidance, for inspiration. So we shall do so again this week. First, as we always do, we'll start the class with a little tzedakah, with a little charity, with a mitzvah. So Hashem blesses us. Let me pick this up and put some tzedakah. You could trust me. Yeah, I don't know if you heard that. And we put a little tzedakah. Now let's say a bracha. If you have your own coffee, let me make sure the mic is working. I guess it is. Let's say a bracha. If you have your own coffee, make your own blessing. If not, answer Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niya bidvaro. Okay, this week's Torah portion begins Parsha Shmot. Begins with the telling the story of after the passing of Jacob and the 12 tribes and so on, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and it talks about the beginning of the exile of Egypt. It is the first time that collectively as a people, as a nation, that we find ourselves in diaspora, in exile in a foreign country. And Torah, as the word Torah, as we said so many times, Torah is not just a history book. Torah means a guide. It teaches us how to live and how to respond to challenges that come our way. So today we are in the diaspora. Even living in Israel, we are in the diaspora. That's perhaps a discussion for another time. And I want to just read some verses in the Torah and glean guidance and so on to the two issues that we find in the Torah and what we could take from the portion to give us strength and guidance. One thing, the two primary challenges that happen when we leave our country, we leave the Holy Land, we go into diaspora, we go into exile. There are two challenges that we have had to deal with over history, over the years of exile. One is assimilation where the host country, either based on persecution or based on kindness, and the lure of the host country that we're in, that we assimilate, rather than maintaining our identity as a Torah nation, as we receive the Torah at Mount Sinai. This is not to say that we don't appreciate and we are not loyal citizens, patriotic citizens to our country. Of course we are. But that does not mean that we lose our identity of who we are and the mission and purpose as a Jewish people. So that's one of the challenges. The other challenge, of course, is the age-old anti-Semitism that keeps on coming back again and again, as we are experiencing now, even more so in the last couple of years. And here we find in our Torah portion, we find both those things occurring, and we find the anecdote that the Torah tells us. So the Torah begins, let me read the holy words of the Torah. Ve'ele Shmot, this is the way it starts the portion of the week. Ve'ele Shmot b'nei Yisrael, these are the names of the children of Israel, Habayim Mitzrayma, that are coming to Egypt. Et Yaakov ishu be'sebo, with Yaakov, they each came with their family. It's a very loaded verse, and in some ways this is a total repetitive verse. We know already the names of who came to Egypt. It's mentioned before in Genesis. Nevertheless, he mentions all the names again, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, all the names of the tribes. We know this already. He also tells us, let me put the Chumash over here so I don't have to turn my head away. He also tells us they came with Jacob. We know this. They came with their families. It seems to be that this whole verse is almost superfluous. And then the Torah tells us just a couple of verses down, the Torah tells us, Vayamos Yosef, Yosef died, V'cholach of all his brothers, V'chol Hadorahu, and that entire generation. And the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, Paru, Vayishritzu, the Torah goes on to tell us how they multiplied exceptionally. And then the Torah says in verse 8, in verse Ches, Vayokam melech chodesh al Mitzrayim, a new king rose in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, Asher lo yodas Yosef, that did not know Joseph. Vayomer al Bnei Yisrael, Vayomer al Lama, he told his people, his nation, the Egyptians, Hine am Bnei Yisrael rav v'yotzam imenu. The nation of Israel are greater and stronger than us. Hava neschak malo, let's outsmart them. Pen yirbe, perhaps they will even further multiply and they will turn against us. And then they started by enslaving them, putting extra taxes on them, and eventually the genocide of throwing the babies into the Nile and so on. So here we see, first the Torah mentions to us the opening verse, Shmot Bnei Yisrael, the names of the Jewish people. Then the Torah actually lists the names. Then the Torah tells us, Vayokam melech chodesh. It's very interesting. The Torah over here is giving us right away the anecdote or the refuah, the remedy before the makkah, before the plague, before the calamity. The Torah tells us before the illness, before the sickness, before the attack. The Torah tells us, yes, it begins the Egyptian exile. You know how? It didn't happen immediately. It happened first with Vayokam melech chodesh, a new king arose. And as Rashi gives us two opinions, we'll take the one opinion as it pertains to our discussion, that it wasn't actually a new king. It was a king that ignored the contribution of Yosef and the Jews to Egypt, that Yosef practically, totally saved them from a famine that consumed the entire world. He saved Egypt. He turned it into the most prosperous superpower. And yet, at some point, all that did not help. Vayokam melech chodesh, says Rashi, taken from the Talmud, a new king. He totally ignored, new not in the literal sense, but he was like new in the sense that he ignored totally the contribution of Yosef and his people. And how did he start what led to the genocide and the killing of the Jewish babies? He first started with the rhetoric. He started with the rhetoric and saying, look, they are a threat to us. They will harm us, even though nothing changed. Not only nothing changed, on the contrary, from the perspective of the Jewish people, they were loyal citizens and did whatever they could do to help and support Egypt. But anti-Semitism first starts just with rhetoric. The rhetoric then turns to actual planning. It's not just rhetoric, to planning and how to harm the Jewish people. And eventually, sadly, tragically, there was the killing and the violence against the Jewish people and the total enslavement. So that is the Torah telling us already at the first exile of how the progression happens, which is why, today we see this. It's pretty incredible. People who have been at our side and we've relied upon, and all of a sudden are turning against the Jewish people and have turned against the Jewish people. And it starts with rhetoric and tragically and sadly ends off with actual violence. And beyond. And what I mean by beyond is that the violence is actually, we are blamed for why the violence is caused towards us and so on. So this is not new. We find it in the Torah. And, it's good to know that this is not new. And therefore, let's go back to the Torah and see how the Torah tells us right away to deal with both of these problems, both anti-Semitism and assimilation, which happened in Egypt. The Torah right away begins the verse, as I mentioned, Eile Shmot Bnei Yisrael. These are the names of the Jewish people. Why does the Torah begin with this opening statement as it introduces or begins with the entire story of the Exodus of Egypt and all that happened there and its tzoros and redemption? The Torah is telling you not the word, these are the names of the Jewish people who are coming to Egypt, could have just as well read, and these are the Jewish, or the children of Israel coming to Egypt. Shmot b'nei Yisrael, these are the names, says the Medrash. Ruven v'Shimon Nachse, Ruven v'Shimon Tzalke, meaning that they did not change their names. I always wondered, I never got a good answer. Why when you read the Torah in English, they, instead of saying Avraham, they say Abraham. Instead of saying Yitzchak, they say Isaac. I'm not sure where the source of that is. If you write Isaac in a ketubah, in a marriage document, for somebody whose name is Yitzchak, to the best of my knowledge, I'm saying this, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but to the best of my knowledge, that ketubah, that marriage document is not kosher. If a person is called Yitzchak, then you have to write Yitzchak. Where are these names and translation of these names? Instead of Shmuel, you're going to write Sam in a ketubah when the person is called Shmuel. Now, if they're also called Sam, then the ketubah would be kosher. But if they're only called Shmuel, and then in the ketubah you write Samuel, to the best of my recollection, without researching right here on the spot, because this idea came into my mind, at least this example, the ketubah is not kosher. So why in the translations, practically all the translations, when they mention the names, the biblical names, they always give it somehow the secular or I'm not sure where the tradition started, and I'm sure I look it up on ChatGPT or Gemini, I'll the answer might come up over there. But Avram's name was not Abraham. Avram's name was Avraham, and Yitzchak's name was Yitzchak. And here the Torah is telling us, Ve'ela Shmot b'nei Yisrael. You know how the Jews and the children of Israel made sure that they should not assimilate in Egypt? They maintained, says the Medrash, their Jewish names. To give a practical example, you're in college and you're the age of dating, and someone introduces herself or himself to you, and you're a fine Jewish man, Jewish woman who should and is only marry a fellow Jew. Your spouse should be Jewish, 100%. So, if you're dating and someone asks you, okay, so what's your name? And you say, well, my name is Mo, or my name is, Jack, or whatever it is. But if you say, my name is Moshe, my name is Yaakov, my name is Ruvain, that immediately sends a certain message that this is who I am, this is how I identify myself, this is how I represent myself, this is who I am. A name goes deeper than just a label. And so the Torah is telling you, Shmot b'nei Yisrael, they came down and they clearly identified themselves. My name is Reuven. My name is Avraham. My name is Moshe. This in itself was a barrier or a protection against assimilation. Then the Torah continues and says, Haboyim b'nei Yisrael, they were the children of Israel. And by the way, Yisrael, and even though right afterwards he says, Eis Yaakov, they came with Yaakov, and here he says, Yisrael. Yisrael, Jacob had two names, Yisrael and Yaakov. Yisrael represents the higher level, meaning even when coming down to Egypt, you remember who you are. Yisrael. I am Yisrael is, as the verse says in Genesis, that you have battled, you have struggled both with angels and with fellow human beings, and you were victorious. We have to remember who we are and our inner, deeper strength, not to be intimidated, not to back down, not to hide, not to be ashamed. Haboyim Mitzrayim, who are coming to Egypt, not who came, but coming, because always we know that we are here not to have come in the past, in the sense that we are here as just another, we totally assimilate into the culture or value system of where we are in, but on the contrary, and we always know that we are currently coming in the sense that we have a godly mission. We are here to influence, not to be influenced. And how do we do that? The verse still continues in the first verse. Eis Yaakov, we always know we came with Jacob, our father, the third of the patriarchs, who came down to Egypt. And we always know that we're coming with Jacob. Our role model, who we look up to, is not by saying, okay, our grandparents came from Poland, came from Ukraine, came from Russia, but we, have no connection. We have moved forward. We've progressed. But no, we always look back and know that our origins, our connection to Yaakov, that's who we are. We're proud of that. We have adopted those teachings, internalized, and recognized how important it is to our family, which why the verse continues, it says, Eshu Beisai, Bo, they came with their family. One of the most powerful, important strengths of who we are as a people is the structure and the strength of the family, and how we live as a family, how we value family, how we cherish family, how we go ahead and perform our Yiddishkeit, our Judaism, our Torah learning, our tradition, our mitzvahs as a family unit. That's such a powerful strength that we have, that we need to incorporate into our lives. It is these things that the Torah says immediately before it tells us about anti-Semitism, before it tells us about exile, because it is these values and cherishing and understanding that. It is such an important lesson for us living here in the Western world. We're visiting the United States. We are so blessed. This country has been an incredible blessing. But the country's blessing is that it allows us to maintain and to be who we are. That's what freedom of religion is. That's what freedom of expression is. It allows us to be who we are. So this is what the Torah tells us. In fact, interestingly enough, I'll mention one more point, that the Torah begins to tell us that Pharaoh made a decree, and his objective was to get rid of the Jewish kindalach, of the Jewish children. What did Miriam and Yocheved, the famous mother of Moses and sister of Moses, what did they do? They defied Pharaoh's decree, and they made a great effort to have even more children. And this is a reference to something else that we've spoken about more than once, how important it is. The greatest blessing is to have more children. You have a home based on Jacob, based on Jacob's values, based on strong family, the obligation to have children that are raised in that environment increases, because we need good people. We need godly people. We need people who can take the values, the beautiful values, the absolute values of Torah and Judaism, and make the world, the entire world, a better world. So the Torah over here, in just a couple of small sentences, if you pay attention, tells us about how the problem occurs and what our enemies, how they go about it. Interestingly enough, the Medrash tells us, this is an approach in the Medrash. The question is, why anti-Semitism? Why does God allow? Where does it come from? And I have many answers, and there's been so much discussion and insights and research and so on and so forth. Here you see a couple of things. Number one, it's not what the Jews did. The Jews didn't all of a sudden decide to rebel against Pharaoh that caused the anti-Semitism. It was just all of a sudden Pharaoh, because of the success and the help of the Jewish people, that he started to feel threatened. And the answer was not, okay, therefore, let us diminish, let us assimilate. The answer was on the contrary. Miriam and Yocheved had total misirat nefesh, total self-sacrifice. They put their life on the line to be able to produce more proud Jewish kindalach, Yiddish kindalach, who are part of this Shmot B'nai Yisrael. These are the names of the B'nai Yisrael, Yaakov, those who are connected and are proud of where they come from, and they live according to those values passed on by Jacob. That is the anecdote. And so the Medrash, going back to what I wanted to say, the Medrash says one of the reasons for the Egyptian irrational hatred to the Jewish people was exactly that, what happens is, unfortunately, sadly, often we forget who we are. And it's only after, so tragically, an attack like October 7th, that the inner core, inner soul, inner neshama of who we are is arisen. Is that word correct? In the most powerful, beautiful, potent way. Sometimes that's what it takes, sadly. And I always make this clear that doesn't justify that kind of pain, but this is the result. As we see it now with the younger generation in Israel, it's incredible, and throughout, how much their inner soul came out with such power and such force that it's just mind-boggling in an impressive way. So the Medrash already, by the first anti-Semitism directed towards our people in Egypt, the Medrash tells us the reason why we became disgusted in the eyes of the Egyptians, no matter what we did beneficially for Egypt, was so that we do not forget who we are, so that we do not assimilate. So these are beautiful short lessons from the Torah portion that we're about to read. It also tells us, what's the takeaway? That the response is, as Miriam and Yocheved, which in their honor, because they had that response, Moses was born, who redeemed the Jewish people from Egypt, which is why we are here today, receiving the Torah and being a nation throughout history, was because of these two mothers who decided we're not going to assimilate. We're not going to heed the decrees of Pharaoh. That is a everlasting, eternal lesson for us in our own, starting with ourselves, in how we behave, how our family behaves. May Hashem help that as we take this message, and just like then it led to the redemption of Egypt, the Geula, so too may the promise of our prophets, which is the Geula Hamitit Vashlema, the complete and final redemption, occur as a result of so much of this lesson that we will continue to learn and implement. And as the Talmud says, every single time a child is born, you bring the Geula, you bring redemption closer. And the other messages discussed here in this class, which are so necessary, important, and uplifting and meaningful to our life and the lives of our family. Have a fantastic week. Please share these words of Torah with your sort of social friends, your friends, etc., etc.